We've got proof that the PS5 Slim is coming. Would you buy a more expensive PS5? Should you just wait for the DualSense Edge? And also down in the description, I have a ton of links to controllers, SSDs, TVs, monitors, headsets, any accessory you need for your PS5. I have a link for it down in the description. So if you want to help me out, use those links. How's it going, everyone? We're finally back in the studio with the 2-host video for the weekend. I've got my boy Ray here, back from the dead. How's it going?
It's going well, man. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back in saddle, back in the studio. It's always nice to have these talks, you know.
So here's what you missed. Austin and I got the new PS5, and basically, if you haven't heard, it's like lighter, just like the one last year. And last year, when we got the lighter PS5, we took it apart and they made it smaller, but the redesign made it run hotter, which is bad because Sony technology likes to overheat and degrade over time. So they're back again with the 1200 revision, and this one is like much better.
I remember very specifically last year when you did that teardown and you talked about the heat sink. There was quite the firestorm that followed.
Yeah, everyone went after Austin. Which is funny.
Yeah, no discovery as crazy as last year's video and last year's teardown. From what I was understanding from the video and what you were doing with Austin, they did a pretty decent job and they managed to make it for cheaper, from my understanding.
Which is bad because we'll talk about this later. But yeah, they made it cheaper to produce by decreasing the size of the motherboard to it's like half the size of the original one. To the point where the plastic casing here that's in between the two side plates, it has like new structure inside of it to hold the motherboard in place because it's so small. Like at this point, they could just take this motherboard and make a PS5 Slim, but for some reason, this is a revision and not a new model. Isn't that kind of weird?
This could have been the prototype for a PS5 Slim. Why don't you think they took it a step further?
I don't know, because even the chip, apparently, Austin thinks this. We don't know for sure. I think he's going to do another video about it, but like the theory that we came up with is that the chip is improved in some way, like the APU, which like if you've ever used a gaming PC, you know you have a separate CPU and GPU. Consoles have one chip where everything is done on the chip. They don't have like a graphics card in there like your PC does. The APU is using 20 less watts of power and running cooler than the old one, like even cooler than the original model, which is crazy because that shows they've messed with the actual design of the PlayStation 5. The only bad thing about this redesign though is that the CMOS battery, which you need to be able to play digital games, like that battery's internal clock has to line up with the internet in some way. I don't really understand it. You need that battery and you can replace it and then you'll be fine. Like with the PS3, you can replace it there too, and the PS4. They moved it. It used to be super accessible. Like right when you would open the PS5, it'd be one of the first things you'd see. Now it's underneath the heatsink, and I don't think you can easily take off the heatsink. So that's kind of frustrating, but overall, it seems like a much better redesign, and I'm all for a redesign that's going to run cooler. I think that's good.
Is the SSD still kind of in the same, like it plays by the same rules? Because I know you did a video demonstrating on how you can expand your storage with the PlayStation 5. Is that still sort of the same process? Or?
The tray is different. They used to have a PCB there, which is like the green material you see on a motherboard, and they just made it all metal now, which I guess is another reason why the new PS5 is lighter. The numbers are still there though, so you can see where you put the screw for your drive because, you know, there's different size drives. I'm sure that's also an improvement they're making to help it run cooler. But the kind of cool thing about it, which I know no one's ever going to really experience because you'd need two PS5s, is that when you like lift up this PS5, this launch edition, the weight is very evenly distributed across the entire PS5. But this new one, it's so light at the top. Like when you lift it, it feels like if you had a shopping bag with like a bowling ball in it. Like all the weight is at the bottom.
Weird. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first things I noticed when I picked up my PS5, I guess a year and a half ago. I was like, this thing is heavy. Like minus, you know, all like the packaging and stuff. I'm like, this thing is legitimately a heavy object.
So yeah, the reason I think they didn't just do a PS5 Slim is a combination of two things. First of all, I bet the PS5 Pro isn't ready yet and they want to release it alongside that, because that's what they did with the PS4 and the PS4 Pro. They released them at the same time and they had very similar design languages. So I'm assuming whatever redesign they want to do on the PS5, they'll make it streamlined. And also, I think it's a bad look, like even badder than the look that they have right now, to release a new version of the PS5 when people are still having this much trouble getting it.
So much trouble, yeah. I mean, 2 years in and people are still complaining about not being able to upgrade to that PlayStation 5. And it's getting to the point where developers, publishers, they're leaving the last generation behind. So that anxiety is building. Like, I need to upgrade now before these, I can't play games anymore.
This is teasing us with the PS5 Slim. I would guess those rumors from TCL of all companies are probably true, and we'll see at least the announcement by the end of last year for the Slim and Pro.
And those guys at TCL, it's obvious now, you look back on it. At the time, we were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because it was the first time we ever saw the console refresh mentioned by a legitimate company and not like some dude on Twitter or whatever.
But it turns out they're right.
But it turns out they might be right in a wild way, at least with the timeline, because I think they were saying 2024 was when, like,
which would make sense, right? We get the
announcement
announcement next year around September, October, and then it releases in February. Which brings me to my next topic here. Knowing that we both have PS5s, would you pay more for it if they raise the price to like $550?
I really feel like there's nothing that they've added. If something catastrophic happened to my PlayStation 5 and I had to buy an increased price PlayStation 5, I would be upset, because there's just nothing that they've added that justifies a $50 price increase for me. And there's no games that are really like truly next gen. The user interface is more or less the same. Experiencing performance mode in Spider-Man for the first time versus a 30 FPS version, I was like, oh my god, that's mind-blowing. But is that worth $50? I'm not entirely sure.
Honestly, having used the PS5 as much as I have, I would probably pay it, because I thought it was going to be $600, and that's what I was preparing for the year leading up to it, right? I buy my own consoles. Yes, I had to pay for it myself, so I was saving up money, and I was like, I just got a feeling these things are going to be more expensive just because of the power increase over the PS4 Pro even. So I was prepared to spend $600. They released it at $500. I felt like I was getting a deal, and just the quality of the games I've played on my PS5 so far has been so good that if I saw these games coming out like Returnal, Demon Souls, Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok coming up soon, I just played The Last of Us Part 1. If I was coming into it now and I saw that I had all of these games available to me, especially most of them being available on PlayStation Plus Extra, including Deathloop, in just a few weeks, man, it's $50 extra, but like I can just pay for a month of extra and get all of these games for free with that subscription, and I'm still paying less than I would if I bought all of those games individually.
I still think it's whack that they increased the price, considering we know that they're profitable. We just talked about it. They made these models in a cheaper way.
Yeah, Microsoft is just so much better at having synergy with their multiple like brands underneath them. They wouldn't do something like this where even if Microsoft head was like, Satya calls up Phil Spencer and he's like, hey, we're raising the Xbox price by $50 around the world. Phil Spencer would be like, oh, shoot, we're also releasing a revision of the Xbox that makes it slimmer and cheaper to produce. That's bad timing. And they'd be like, okay, let's space it out. Whereas at Sony, they're like, they've been planning this new lighter PS5. We talked about it months ago here on the channel because the patent came out, and then just like the higher ups at Sony don't know what's going on and decide to raise the price right when that PS5 starts coming out. It's the most Sony move ever, and the reason I think they even let it go through is because they know people will buy it. They have a ton of data showing people are already dropping like $650, $700 on these PS5s, and they're like, well, if they're willing to pay scalpers that much, they'd probably be willing to pay us a little bit more. And from everything we've seen, that's coming true. Like, these things are still selling out.
I think they're testing the waters. They're like, a little $50 increase, people are still gonna buy them. Okay, people are still buying them. $600 maybe in some regions. I don't know if they would take it that far, because the press would absolutely lose their minds. Yeah. But I mean, they've already done it with their games. They, up the price of $70. They charge you for the freaking, next gen patch, next gen upgrades for some of these games. So yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of testing the water, seeing like, okay, let's see how much money we can get out of this.
Now I have a question for you. Is Microsoft scared of the DualSense Edge?
Oh man.
That was a joke. I just think the timing worked out right.
Oh man.
So yeah, tell me about this white Elite Series 2. Like, what's the difference here? Because you've already told me a couple things today that I didn't know about. I thought it was just a white, cheaper model.
So this new Elite Series 2, the white version that we're seeing that they just announced, it's sort of a rebrand, a little bit of a rebrand. It's the Elite Series 2 white core is what they're saying. And the idea behind that is that they want to give you just the core experience of owning an Elite Series 2 controller, and they're marking it down a little bit. So if you just want the controller, that's it. Like, you pay $130.
Almost double the price of a Series X controller.
Yeah. And then if you want all the extra stuff that comes with just a regular Elite Series 2 controller, you can buy that as well. So the paddles, the adjustable thumbsticks, the extra D-pad, all that swappable stuff. And it comes with a little carrying case that if you put it on, it charges while it's in the case. So yeah, they're giving you the option to where if like you just want the controller, you can just buy the controller. You say, I don't want all the extra stuff, whatever. And if you buy it together, it's the same price of a regular Elite Series 2, but not much has changed. But they did say, they came out and they said that the build quality has improved. They have adjusted some things.
So they improved the durability of the controller.
From my understanding, from the Xbox Wire blog post, that's
that
what we're led to believe.
Honestly, like, they've released the Elite Series 2. They released a Halo version of it last year. That's the old version, like the old, less durable one. And now if you want to get a more durable controller, you have to pay $60, you said? 130?
130, $129.99.
You can tell that's what they're expecting people to do by releasing it separately from the accessories, right? Because if you already have an Elite Series 2 and you want the more durable version of it, you can just buy it and then use your current accessories pack, which is nice. I just wish they would extend this to the black one, because they'll probably keep selling that.
And yeah, but it's perfect for me who already has the Elite Series 2, and it's like, oh cool, this white one, that looks dope. I want it, but I don't want all the extra stuff because I already have it. But to your point, this is basically Microsoft's sort of response to the DualSense Edge, and will it be enough? I'm not, because
I wish they changed the shape to make it more like the Series X controller, because that fits better in my hand.
Yeah, but
like, I default to that over my Elite controller because it feels nicer.
Most Xbox fans, they're happy with the shape of the controller. They're happy with the controller as it is. It's like, what else can you add? A lot of the features that I want them to steal from the DualSense, they can't because they're patented or they're trademark, right? Like,
I think the DualSense Edge, the announcement, is also very weird. Like, that's a controller to me is something you put a trailer for out and then you're like, yeah, it's going to be available in a week. Not like, here's the DualSense Edge. We're not going to tell you a single thing about it. Also, we have no idea when it's coming out. It's like, it's a controller. It's not a new console. It's not the PSVR 2 where you're like, oh man, this is a new hardware upgrade for my whole setup. It's just a controller. So for them to put out that weird trailer that just kind of like vaguely hints alongside the blog post about what you're going to get with it, and not showing the carrying case, not showing the charger that comes with it, that's just kind of weird to me. It just feels like they were throwing our boy Jeffy a bone. Jeff Keighley, our boy Jeff Keighley, a bone. Dude, if Sony can come in with this thing and charge 130 or 150 even for it, that's going to be making the Elite Series 2 a tough sell for a lot of people, I think.
I don't know. Can they do it that cheap? Because already, I mean, the DualSense is, it's not as... I mean, it's only just it's $70, so I mean, already that's pretty cheap. But like, can you maintain
asking for
that?
Double is fair, right? Like, well, fair
at
right?
least double. I mean,
yeah,
at least.
I think they'll ask for more. I'm thinking more of like a 200 price range is where they'll be at, like where it'll settle. But if they can come out at around 150, that would be pretty cool. The issue is, I always will default back to an Xbox controller on PC, mainly because to take advantage of DualSense features with games like God of War or Spider-Man or Ghostwire Tokyo, you need to be using the controller wired. And it's like, dude, I don't live in 1985. Like, I don't want to use a wired PS5 controller with my PC. Microsoft has this great little USB dongle that's $20. That's the radio from the inside of the Series X. And Sony could just easily make one of those for the PC and it would fix every issue.
Yeah, I mean, DualSense Edge, very exciting. But when you look at Sony's other practices when it comes to pricing, I would assume it's going to be, like you said, closer to 200. You know, I can't imagine they would. Yeah, they're going to pay for it. People are going to pay for it anyway because it's the first pro version of this controller that everyone loves. And I do like, I mean, the DualSense is cool. I ain't gonna lie. I ain't gonna front. Like, console warring aside, like when I was playing through Ghost of Tsushima and I could feel the vibrations of my footsteps as I was running through Japan, when I could feel the vibrations of like an artifact being close to me as I was wearing my traveler's attire, that was really freaking cool. And the DualSense, I mean, if they can, it's hard to mess this up, right? Because all you got to do is just deliver the thing that you already have, and then just add like extra paddles on it and like a swappable thumbsticks, you know?
I want metal on there. I want aluminum in some way. Like, I want that premium Sony like heavy weight. Like, even if they're just putting weights inside of it to make it feel more premium, yeah, I want some sort of like brushed aluminum on the touchpad or like something, or that black portion that like clips off. That could be metal. It could be like glossy, shiny metallic metal. It'd be so cool. It kind of looks like it in the trailer. That's what's making me think about it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna buy it either way. I don't really care how much it costs. I think it's really cool. I just hope they figure out how to make it work with PC. But yeah, you just reminded me, The Last of Us Part 1, I didn't talk about this in my last video. The haptic feedback in that game is sick. It is so cool when you're walking around and there's rain, you like feel it in the controller. When you're healing Joel with the med kit, you've got to pull and hold on the trigger and it hits the lock there, so it's like harder to pull. And just like the different weapons have different like pull animations with the trigger. It's not really an animation, it's like an adapted, what do you call it? It has a different like feel to it, but depending on the gun you use. They went all out, and that's like what makes it feel next gen, and just shows how good Naughty Dog is, where they've released essentially, like from a gameplay perspective, this completely unchanged game in 2022 that came out almost 10 years ago, and it feels like a PS5 game. It's crazy.